Good evening, Sukihotu. Welcome to another round of live Dharma sharing on Facebook. Today is 13th September, and we will be doing the Awakening series, number 14, and starting a new topic. It is called Relax and Introspect, and this is the first of this new topic, part 1, okay? So before I begin, I would like to share with you this link that you can download the slides. You can follow along with this with today's sharing. This is the presentation slides I will be using. So I hope you can follow along with these slides. That will be helpful. So today we are going to cover a very important topic, because we are really getting into talking about the practical aspects of the Dharma that can help us relieve ourselves of pain and suffering and so on. And one of the most important thing we have to understand is that we are suffering because we get stressed over many things. So I think being stressed is a good way of describing this condition that the Buddha was saying. The Buddha was teaching as dukkha. Okay, so in the doctrine of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths, he was talking about that there is dukkha and there are reasons or causes of dukkha. So stress is one of the biggest cause of dukkha. So it's important and helpful for us to truly understand what really is stress, not just to experience it and say that, oh, I'm feeling stressed, but actually understand what is the thing that is happening behind this thing called stress. And then we're going to discuss this very important part called general adaptation syndrome. This is actually very thorough explanation of stress by this scientist by the name of Hans Selye many years ago. Okay, and we also talk about how stress disturbs the mind, and the mind being disturbed is called distress. Stress is the body feeling uncomfortable because of many things happening around us, and distress is the mind getting disturbed because of all these bodily discomfort and so on. And we're going to explore what really is distress. And then most importantly, we are going to look at how we can calm stress and distress with relaxation of the body and through the introspective awareness of the mind. So relaxation and introspection are very important and helpful tools for us to help relax the body and calm the mind. So this is what we're going to look at today. This is really very much touching on the first of the Four Noble Truths. Right? What is dukkha? That we are experiencing dukkha, and stress is one of them. So what really makes us stressed? Right? I've basically simplified it by putting it in three major categories. The first is when we experience emotional encounters. We call this trauma of some sort. Encounters that arouse emotions of fear, anger, anxiety, frustration, disgust, shame, and so on. A whole lot of emotional states arising. And this is because we encountered something that is very emotional. So we call this trauma. The second category is basically things going wrong, things not going according to plan, encountering problems, adversities, difficulties, obstacles, restrictions, challenges, and so on. So things not happening according to our plans or our wishes. That is usually because things are failing and there are disappointments. So these are adversities. The third category basically is uncertainties, anicca, things happening unexpectedly. So it's unexpected or unfamiliar circumstances, changes, perplexity, meaning that things are tearing us apart. We cannot decide. That's perplexity. Vacillation, where the mind is flopping between one thought and another, back and forth. So the mind is flipping and flopping. That is vacillation. and indecisiveness. And because of all this, we are not able to make a decision what to do about it. And finally, also including this category called boredom. That means we are feeling lost, and basically in that state we're feeling bored, and we lose confidence and motivation. So this leads to all kinds of confusion and turmoil in the mind. So basically these are three major categories. Right? There could be other smaller ones, but these are the major ones that's happening around us all the time. These are the things that make us stressed. Now, one of the important things is the word dukkha. Right? The word dukkha is popularly translated as suffering. Well, nothing wrong with that. It's just that if you just call it suffering, it actually can be a little bit misleading, because it means a lot more than that. Dukkha is not just suffering. I'll give you an example, right? Commonly, we call it suffering, but it could also be feeling of insecurity, right? If things are not happening according as we wish, we're feeling insecure. We're not sure what's going to happen. Feeling of dissatisfactoriness. If it is not what we want, we get upset. We're not happy with it. So this is dissatisfactoriness. We're not satisfied with what's going on. Then feeling of grief, lamentation, anxiety, worry, fear, frustration. These are all different manifestations of dukkha. So you can see, if you just call it suffering, it doesn't really explain properly what is the true meaning of dukkha. But more importantly, dukkha is also talking about stress and distress. Stress is when the body is disturbed, the body is feeling uncomfortable because of stress hormones being released. So the body is feeling very tensed, right? And when that happens, it disturbs the mind, and that is called distress. This, in fact, I think is the most important explanation of the meaning of dukkha. And I'm going to go through with you the explanation and exploration of what is stress and how it arises and how it turns into distress. So all this also leads to various aspects or various forms of unhappiness. We're not happy. And if things go really bad for us, it's trauma and it's agony, it's anguish. It may lead us to go into depression. And our mind will be getting all confused, very perplexed, and boredom, and so on. So there's really, you can come up with another 100 words describing what is dukkha. So dukkha is not just simply put as suffering, you know. Of course, you can easily say, oh, all this is suffering. But sometimes, you know, suffering it alone, the word suffering does not do justice to the real meaning of dukkha. So I hope I have painted a pretty good picture to explain the real essence of what really is dukkha, okay? So it's not just simply put as suffering, but the main part that I'm going to talk about today is stress and distress. So first, let's talk about stress. I'm just going to show you something that explains very quickly what is stress.
You feel it every day, whether it's a screaming baby or your screaming boss, a traffic jam, or a final exam. Stress is a part of everyday life and has evolved as a tool for survival. And when you face the threat of failure, your brain triggers a biochemical chain reaction, flooding your system with hormones and causing physical changes, which we collectively label stress. And every stress response he just mentioned is triggered by your amygdala. When you're facing stress, the most primitive part of your brain, the amygdala, signals a flood of hormones into your bloodstream that includes adrenaline and cortisol. These hormones cause your breathing to quicken, your heart to pump faster, and your senses to become sharper, all in an effort to combat any perceived threat, even if that threat is just a tough crowd or your daily commute.
Even though stress is something most of us experience every day, we probably know less about it than we think.
Here to explain more about your brain and stress is Dr. Ches Stetson, a neuroscientist from Caltech.
So the classic description of stress, it's a chain reaction of signals that makes its way out into your body and then induces all of the responses that we associate with stress. Not all of the things like increased heart rate are bad. They may just be there to get you through a demanding situation expediently.
Not all stress is bad, and sometimes it can even...
Now, that last statement, some people might find it interesting. It says, not all stress is bad. Sometimes it can be helpful. Actually, stress is something that has evolved in our body to help us deal with things that happen suddenly. You know, it could be like what I described in those three: trauma, unexpected events, uncertainties, and emotional encounters, and so on. So stress is something that happens in our body automatically. It's called autonomous reaction, and we can't really prevent it from happening. Every one of us, we will experience stress the moment something unexpected happens, or traumatic encounters, and so on. So it's evolved into our body. It's part and parcel of the activities of the body that we have no control over. This is also the reason why we do not own our body, because we have no control over it. If you own something, you have control over it. But if you have no control over it, then it's not yours. So the body is not me. Because all these things just happens, right? Okay, let's just quickly describe how it all happens. And I think many of you have seen this before. When environmental activities stimulate our sense organs that we're able to see, hear, smell, taste, and touch, then a perception arises in our mind. This is the process of panchakanda, the 5 aggregates, where it produces a perception. Now we become aware. And when we are aware of something, we begin to interpret it. And this is called papancha. And therefore, we begin to give meaning to it and create concepts. And that whole process is called papancha, sanya, sanka. That means putting these sensations into categories. Sanka means categories. So we're basically categorizing everything that we identify. And this is what we call recognition, recognition. And as a result of that, we begin to create concepts. Okay, so I have already spoken quite a lot about this. I will go a bit fast on this. I won't elaborate too much more. These are all in my previous sharing. So conception of what is happening, so-called out there, the objective experience. Right? So basically, it's concepts, ideas, or notions in the mind, right? And these are the fundamental building blocks of thoughts and beliefs. They play an important role in all aspects of cognition, our thinking. And when it arises, when we have an idea or a concept, then we begin to feel whether it is pleasant or unpleasant, or neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And that arouses the affective process in the mind. And this is the chitta part of the mind. The cognitive process that interprets what is happening, that is the mano part of the mind, the thinking part of the mind, the cognitive process. And chitta is the emotional part of the mind. And that triggers a reaction in the amygdala that releases hormones, causing a biochemical chain reaction in the body. And this is unconscious emotional arousal. And this is creating tensions in the body. We call it stressors. And because of these stressors, we start to experience a lot of things. So this is when stress arises. So the manifestation of stress begins when we experience the environment, and this environmental stimulus produce the perception. This is because of the panchakanda. And then we begin to interpret it with papancha. We begin to interpret our circumstances. And then we begin to feel whether it is pleasant or unpleasant. The pleasant or unpleasant feelings arouse emotions either way, okay? And because of this emotion arousal, it goes into this vicious cycle of emotions with the chitta producing hormones and so on. And that really is the stress reaction up to this point, creating this fight or flight reaction in the body, okay? So this is the stress reaction because of the activation of the amygdala. Right? The amygdala is triggered and it then reacts by producing hormones. The amygdala senses, scans all our sensory inputs coming in from our eyes, our ears, our nose, our tongue, and our body. and it reacts to any sign of potential threat or danger, and that causes a chain reaction in the whole body, in the organism. And this chain reaction is, when activated, it releases hormones causing the fight or flight reaction. This is stress. This fight or flight reaction is really the stress because of stress hormones causing bodily discomfort. And the body reacts in order to protect the organism from harm, and arousing all kinds of emotional states. And when these emotional states are aroused, they are really like a terrorist in our brain. So the amygdala is both a bodyguard of the brain, or a bodyguard of the organism, and it is also a terrorist in the brain when it is unnecessarily aroused and triggers all the chain reaction, causing the body to be all tensed up. So stress begins with these stress hormones causing the body to be all tensed up. Right? And what happens when stress is aroused with the tension? Well, the brain actually sends message to the glands, and it reaches various glands. Adrenal gland is one of them. So there are two adrenal glands on top, above the kidneys. All right. So we have two of them on the left side and the right side. So these two adrenal glands release two very powerful stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol. And they flood the body through the bloodstream and causes various chain reactions in the body. It causes your heart to beat faster, your blood pressure to rise, and your blood circulation speeds up, and respiration deepens. You breathe deeper, and it increase the oxygen intake. And your intestinal movement is suspended. In activities in the intestines or the digestive system is suspended in order to conserve energy, so that your body now has more energy to fight against the stress, and muscles getting all tensed up. It also causes other activities like hair standing on end. We call them goosebumps or goose pimples, right? And your pupils dilate. That means they open up, and you simply because this is a reaction to help you see more clearly what's happening out there. So this is the pupils dilating to see more clearly. Facial expressions are distorted, and you may be perspiring and trembling and body temperature rising. So you can see in the picture, the cat is a classic example, right? The facial expression of the man also. Facial expression distorted, hair standing on end, because cats have very long furry hair. You can see the hair standing on end, right? And pupils dilating, the eyeball opening up, So all this is happening. And also internally, it causes the blood sugar level to rise, so that it is able to assist in the metabolism to convert stored energy into active energy you can use to fight against the threat. And your body immune system has to be suppressed, because otherwise your body immune system will try to prevent all this from happening. So all this is really very, very unhealthy. This is what is called stress, the fight or flight reaction, right? So Bhante Punnaji has explained very thoroughly what is this stress reaction, and this is actually written down by a very famous scientist in the past by the name of Hans Selye. He wrote it and he called it general adaptation syndrome.
Hans Selye, who spoke about stress, he spoke about a thing called the general adaptation syndrome, which has three parts: the alarm reaction, the stage of resistance, and the stage of exhaustion. Alarm reaction means, now if someone dies or some close relative dies, we begin to cry and lament, grief and lamentation. That is the meaning of soka parideva. Soka means grief, parideva means lamentation. And then that is called the alarm reaction. That means we react in this way when that someone dies or something very unpleasant happens. Then if we keep on crying and lamenting, say for 1 month, and at that time people will not be even able to eat or sleep properly. If you are crying and lamenting for 1 month, what happens? Your body becomes completely sick and all kinds of pains come into the body. And not only that, even your mind is depressed. That is called the stage of resistance, because you are resisting what happened. You are not willing to accept the death of your mother or your father or your brother or sister or whoever. And that is a stage of sickness in the body. And then, if it still continues beyond 1 month, what will happen? You will be completely exhausted, and as a result, you might even either commit suicide or you might automatically die. That is called the stage of exhaustion. And this is all in the words of the Buddha. Soka parideva is the alarm reaction. Dukkha domanassa. Dukkha is the physical pain, domanassa is the mental pain. That is the stage of resistance. And then the last stage is upayasa. Upayasa means exhaustion, where you might even commit suicide or die. So this is really a very interesting thing, that the modern scientists who are explaining these things, they are really talking about what the Buddha has been saying long time ago. So this shows that the teachings of the Buddha is so important, and also it is a fact. It's not just a blind belief. So it is very important to understand these things and begin to practice these things so that you can be free from all sufferings of samsara.
So Bhante had explained quite a bit. We'll come back to it in a moment. I have it all in text so you can follow along. All right. So first, Bhante was talking. There are these 5 different stages of suffering that the Buddha was explaining. Right? The 5 stages of dukkha. First is soka, which is grief and sorrow. So when something unpleasant happens, we feel sad about it or we are unhappy. So this is the state of soka. Parideva is when we begin to express this unhappiness, lamentation, lamenting, crying, right? Or screaming out. So this is lamenting. And then the third one is that we are experiencing physical pain. This is really stress. The body is being stressed. So it's feeling uncomfortable. This is dukkha. Dukkha in this context is referring to physical pain. So it's really the body is being stressed with stress hormones. And the mind is being disturbed. That is called domanassa. So this is really distress. Right? Now, what I have in red there is actually the popular translations by other translators. But the text that is in black, that is Bhante Punnaji's explanation. So it is more accurate and precise. Domanassa really is a mental anguish, right? Distress. And upayasa is referring to this stage where you give up. It's exhaustion. You run out of ideas on how to solve the problem, you finally give up. And actually, it is expiration. It means it could mean death, and death can happen in two ways. It can happen when your body is so stressed, you get a cardiac arrest, heart attack, and then you die from the heart attack. So this is upayasa. So this is physical aspect of it. The mental aspect of upayasa is that you are so depressed that you may want to commit suicide. Right? You want to kill yourself. You want to give up life. So that is also upayasa, and that is the mental part, the mental anguish of giving up. Right? So you finally said, "I've had it. Commit suicide." So this is upayasa. So these are the 5 different stages of suffering, right? Dukkha. Now, the Bhante also explained the 3 stages of this general adaptation syndrome described by Hans Selle. Hans Selle explained very thoroughly stress can be described in 3 stages. The first stage is called the stage of alarm reaction. That means when something happens, we get a little bit of a shock. We are surprised. It's something unexpected. So this is this alarm reaction. And this is where stress hormones begin to flood the body. So it is helping to protect the organism, actually. So it's mobilization of this sympathetic nervous system activity. And this is the organism's physiological reaction. Sympathetic nervous system is really producing these hormones to help the body, build up some kind of ability to resist or fight against or run away from the problem. So that's why it's called freeze, fight, or flight. If it is something you've never experienced before, for the first time it is happening to you, you may experience freeze. That means you're all frozen up. You don't know what to do, completely frozen up. Or if it is something that you feel you are powerful enough to fight against it, you will try to fight it and try to overcome it. So that is the fight. Or you feel that it is so overwhelming, you can't handle it. That's why you flight, you run away from it, you withdraw from it. So it's these 3, freeze, fight, or flight. And this reaction changes the body, affects the mind. When you begin to realize that there is this threat and you really put in all the effort to cope with the threat, to fight against it or to run away from it, this is your psychological reaction. You begin to experience all kinds of emotional states, right? In fighting it or running away from it. So it's in conflict with it or in fear of it. And finally, when you're not able to overcome it, you go into exhaustion of resources and failure to overcome the threats, leading to your whole body giving up. As I said, you could end up with cardiac arrest. You may want to commit suicide, or worse still, somewhere in between, you are experiencing depression, you're experiencing post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. So these are all signs of this stage of exhaustion, right? So basically the body and the mind has given up, unable to fight against or run away from the threat. So these are the 3 stages of stress, which is called classified as general adaptation syndrome. So if you want to know more about this, you can Google general adaptation syndrome, Hans Selle, and then you can find a whole lot of writings about this. Okay. So when the body is tensed, so this first sign of stress happens when biochemical reactions flood the body and the body is getting all tensed up. It causes this disturbance, and this is the physiological disturbance we call stress, fight or flight reaction. So this is the dukkha part of it, the pain, the physical discomfort part of it. And this is what Hans Selle described as stage 1, alarm reaction. The body is now experiencing a shock. Right? This is really like a bit of a shock to the body, all these tensions. Okay, and let's take a look at all this happening and disturbing the mind. So it's this feeling and thinking, interacting, and how this amygdala takes control and then our feeling and thinking begins to be in conflict with each other.
When animals are threatened, they experience a surge of hormones that make them ready to attack or to retreat. Human animals are no exception. Our fight or flight response is crucial for our survival.
Anger can feel exhilarating because what we do is trigger the fight or flight response. We secrete lots of adrenaline to power our large muscles in the event that we have to fight or flee from the predator. We secrete cortisol, which heightens our auditory and visual sensitivities. We stop digesting lunch because who needs to digest lunch if you're about to become lunch? Now that response is very appropriate when we're dealing with life-threatening danger. And when we look at what happens physiologically, we stay in this heightened state for quite some period of time. And because we're dealing with fight or flight, we're dealing with impulses that are very strong.
The emotions associated with fight or flight, emotions like anger and fear, are triggered deep inside our brain.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, time!
And when we try to control them, we start a tug of war between our brain's oldest and newest parts. While ancient structures like the amygdala respond to threats by trying to turn our anger or fear on, it's newer structures, such as the prefrontal cortex, the thinking part of our brain, that try to turn them off. It's the tug of war between these two systems that gives rise to our emotions. At New York University, neuroscientist Joseph Ledoux has studied how the amygdala and the cortex shape our emotional responses. You know more about the amygdala than anybody alive, and you still can't control yours.
No.
Why?
Now, there's an interesting thing, again, that has to do with the wiring of the brain. This is, if we could just look at it here. So this is the human brain inside a skull. And the prefrontal cortex is here in the front, right behind your forehead. And that is the newest part of the brain. This is where we make our decisions, this is where we plan for the future and strategize. The lateral prefrontal cortex has no connectivity with the amygdala. The amygdala has superhighways to talk to the cortex, but the prefrontal cortex has only back roads and side streets to get to the amygdala. And therefore, it is unable to tell the amygdala, cool it.
But why are there no connections?
We're in the process of evolving as we speak, and those connections have not been put in yet. This thing was built to do fancy things cognitively, not necessarily to control our emotions.
The fact that we are not designed to have complete control over our emotions can have some unfortunate consequences.
So basically, what happens is that when we are experiencing stress in the brain, the emotional part of the brain is sending a lot of signals and messages to disturb the thinking part of the brain. So it is the amygdala sending a lot of messages disturbing our thinking so that we are unable to think clearly. So with that conflict going on, then we get very perplexed and confused and depressed and so on. So when all this stress is happening, it arouses the emotions. So we get into this state of emotional excitement, leading to mental proliferation. I've already spoken quite a lot about mental proliferation. So now the mind begins to imagine all kinds of things. And so there is a tug of war going on between this emotional thinking, emotional feeling, and our conscious rational thinking. Emotional feeling is the affective process from chitta. The thinking part is in the cognitive process called the mano. And these two are in conflict with each other. And that leads to this mental proliferation because of imagination, because of memory of past experiences, and because of expectations to change the present. See, imagination is something we're thinking about what's going to happen in the future, but it hasn't happened yet. We're just imagining it. It's just in our mind that is creating this thing that we think is going to happen, but it may not happen at all. Imagination. So it's about something that we think could happen in the future. Memory is recalling the past. Oh, I experienced this before and how it hurts me. So all this memory of past experiencing disturbing us. And then expectation is trying to change the present, expecting something to be different. So you have imagination, memory, expectation, and this is what I call the IME syndrome. And if you look clearly, it means the I, me syndrome, because it makes us very self-centered. When these things arise, all mental proliferation is self-centered. We're just thinking of I, me, or mine. That's why I call I call this the I, me syndrome. This mental proliferation. And this is really distress, what the Buddha calls domanassa, right? The distress part. And this is what Hans Selye classified as stage 2, the stage of resistance. Recognition of the threat and effort to cope with the threat. And this is our psychological reaction. Now the mind is very disturbed. The mind is running around, thinking all kinds of thoughts through imagination, memory, and expectations. So, and that arouses all kinds of emotions arising.
Emotions are generated by structures hidden deep in the brain. The tiny almond-shaped amygdala is the first to respond to an emotional event, triggering a series of split-second reactions within the brain's emotional core. Waves of nerve impulses travel down the brainstem, setting off an instantaneous visceral response throughout the body.
A lot of the time, the machinery that produces the emotion is operating without us noticing it at all, creating changes in posture and facial expression, altering the way the organs inside the body are working, preparing the body for what's needed next, generating chemical responses that you will never know existed. And all of this is what constitutes the emotional state.
For most people, awareness of a feeling follows just milliseconds after an emotion is created. The body sends signals back to the area of the brain responsible for conscious thought, making us aware of our feelings.
So this is really, that last part is really the feeling part, right? So because of changes in the body, we begin to feel something about it. And that feeling arouses a lot of emotions. And so these various emotions are aroused, disturbing the thinking brain. So all these feelings are really messages to the thinking brain. So the thinking brain is actually right here in the frontal lobe, right? This is our learning brain, our thinking brain. There are 4 lobes. There is the frontal lobe up the front here, in behind your forehead. There is the parietal lobe over the top. Then there is the temporal lobe on the sides above your ear, right, behind there. And then, of course, there's the occipital lobe at the back, right? But the part that is most responsible for our conscious thinking is this frontal lobe, which is responsible for these various functions like attention system, long-term memory, logic, critical thinking, imagination, creativity, decision-making, goal-setting, planning, judgment, reasoning, and rationalizing. If you look carefully, out of all these functions, it is these last 2 lines that are most responsible for our happiness, whether we can or cannot solve a problem. And this is all the activity of this prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your eyebrow, right deep inside, at the bottom of the frontal lobe, where we are making decisions, where we are setting objectives and goals, where we plan our actions, and we begin to judge right from wrong and reason out what what we can do about it, how we can go about it, and rationalizing, basically allocating necessary resources from our body and our thinking to help us solve the problem. These actually lead to our happiness if we make use of this properly. But unfortunately, when emotions are aroused, the emotional brain is sending so many these sabotaging messages, disturbing your prefrontal cortex, so that your prefrontal cortex is not able to make these, execute these functions properly, not able to decide properly, not able to set clear objectives and goals, how you can go about it, not able to plan the necessary actions, and not having ability to judge right from wrong, not able to reason out how to go about solving the problem, and not able to rationalize what you need to help you solve the problem. So all these functions of our learning and thinking brain is being disturbed when emotions are aroused. This is distress. That's why the Buddha said, emotions dominate the world. Emotions create distress. Emotion is that one thing to which all are spellbound. And here the Buddha was very clear where he described it is our emotions that is causing all these problems. Okay. So if we don't take control of it, it then goes to the next part, which is very dangerous. It's a vicious cycle of chain reaction leading to what is called amygdala hijack. Let's look at how that happens. When things are happening around us, the body is flooded with hormones, we're feeling tensions, and the mind is disturbed, emotions are aroused, disturbing the thinking mind, and emotional excitement with mental proliferations, leading our thinking going haywire. Now, if we don't take control of this, it triggers a chain reaction which is very vicious. Because when the mind is disturbed with distress, it actually causes further release of hormones. So the amygdala becomes hyperactive and causing more hormones to be released, causing more disturbance going on in the body and the mind. So out of control. This is really called amygdala hijack. When the amygdala is out of control, taking control everything, and we are no longer able to overcome that. This is when we fall into depression. This is when we experience post-traumatic stress disorder. And this is when the mind may become suicidal. And worse still, this may even cause cardiac arrest. So we could die from cardiac arrest. We could die from our own suicide. So all this can lead to death. So we have to learn how to deal with all this. So this is what Hans Selye described as the stage 3, the stage of exhaustion. Right? So this is the stage 3 of this general adaptation syndrome. So let's look at what this stage 3 is. Right? We take a look at this post-traumatic stress disorder.
At Massachusetts General Hospital in Boston, scientists are examining the fear response, scanning the brains of people with and without post-traumatic stress disorder. One part of the brain in every test subject is highly responsive: the amygdala.
The amygdala is a small structure which cares a lot about threat and fear. If there's something that may be potentially harmful to us, it is a brain area which gets activated very quickly and recruits other areas of the brain to try to deal with this unexpected circumstance.
The amygdala sends outputs to the body so that your muscles begin to tense, hormones are released, blood pressure goes up, and all of these are part of the protective response of the body, designed by evolution to help you stay alive. Imagine you're walking down a path in the woods, and all of a sudden there's a curved object that looks like a snake on the ground. And you find yourself stopping with your leg resting above that object, and you look down and see that it's simply a stick. So why did your leg stop like that?
In the normal brain, the amygdala acts like an early warning system, alerting us to danger. But the amygdala does not act on its own. The frontal cortex, where we think and reason, plays a crucial role.
There are two parallel routes of fear processing in the brain. One will go directly to the amygdala. It's a quick and dirty pathway, and trigger a fear reaction unconsciously. But then, as the information slowly makes its way to the cortex perceives the difference between the stick and the snake and says it's only a stick.
Once the discerning cortex has determined that there is no call for panic, it sends a message to the amygdala, quieting the fear response. But in post-traumatic stress disorder, the cortex is held hostage by a volatile amygdala. Thinking is hijacked by emotion.
People with PTSD are very sensitively tuned to pick up threat and respond to even very minor stimuli as if their life were in danger.
People who experience PTSD, they are very sensitive to everything that's going on. So they react emotionally very strongly, and as though their life is in danger, and they may even react in a way they may commit suicide, or they become very depressed, or they may even experience cardiac arrest. So this is really the third stage of general adaptation syndrome that the Buddha called upayasa. Okay,
you'll be completely exhausted, and as a result, you might even either commit suicide or you might automatically die. That is called the stage of exhaustion. And this is all in the words of the Buddha. Soka parideva is the alarm reaction. Dukkha domanassa. Dukkha is the physical pain. Domanassa is the mental pain. That is the stage of resistance. And then the last stage is upayasa. Upayasa means exhaustion, where you might even commit suicide or die. So this is really a very interesting thing that the modern scientists who are explaining these things, they are really talking about what the Buddha has been saying long time ago. So this shows that the teachings of the Buddha is so important, and also it is a fact. It's not just a blind belief. So it is very important to understand these things and begin to practice these things so that you can be free from all sufferings of samsara.
So it's very interesting to see that what modern scientists are saying about stress is actually very much what the Buddha had been talking about. So and we are very thankful to Bhante Punnaji, who is able to take these modern scientific explanations and connect it with what the Buddha was actually teaching all along. So let's quickly look through that. It's important to recognize this, that the Dharma can be witnessed here and now. It is timeless. That means the Buddha spoke about it 2,600 years ago, and modern scientists today are also talking about the same thing, even though they may have no idea about Buddhism, right? And basically it is akaliko, timeless, right? And what happened is that Bhante was explaining, this shows that the teachings of the Buddha is so important. It is also a fact, not a blind belief. It is something that modern scientists are actually explaining in the same way. So there is no question about it. It can be supported with science. It is very important to understand these teachings and begin to practice these teachings so that we can be free from all sufferings of samsara. Right? So let's take a look at this connection that Bhante very cleverly explained. Right? When we talk about this general adaptation syndrome, the 3 stages, and then compared with the 5 stages of suffering that the Buddha was talking about, when something unhappy or something unpleasant happens, we begin to feel soka, grief and sorrow. We begin to lament, lamentation, parideva, lamentation. And these correspond with the first stage of general adaptation syndrome, the alarm reaction. And then we begin to experience physical suffering, dukkha, and also disturbing the mind, mental suffering, distress, domanassa. And this corresponds to the stage 2, the stage of resistance, stage 2 of general adaptation syndrome. And finally, when all efforts fail, that is upayasa, exhaustion, expiration. And this corresponds to the 3rd stage of general adaptation syndrome, the stage of exhaustion. So you can see how Bhante Punnaji was able to very simply connect what the Buddha was teaching with what the modern scientists are saying. It's really, Buddha's teaching is scientific, right? So it's not just something to believe, right? It is something that is factual, can be proven with science, and it is factual in this case, right? What can we do about it? Well, we can practice what I call the 3 steps of compassion. First, when things happen around us, learn to pause. Don't react right away. Before I go any further, there is a question, and this is actually the answer to the question. I am very thankful to Sister Evelyn Ong bringing up this question. If all these are emotional, automate, how can or do one change the responses under such emotional situations? Okay, so basically the question centers around the fact that the hormones are released, and that is automatic. We can't control it, auto mode, and at the same time they disturb the emotions. And this is the part where we can have some control over. Emotions being aroused, we may not be able to stop it, but we can prevent it from hurting us. And this is what I'm trying to explain here. So I hope my explanation on this slide here will answer the question of Sister Evelyn Ong. So basically, we may not be able to stop the emotions being aroused. And definitely we can't prevent the stress hormones being released, causing the body to be tensed up. But we can do something about it to reduce our suffering. So when we experience changes in the body, we have to be aware that it causes the heart to beat faster, it causes the breathing to hasten, it causes the blood pressure to rise, and so on. We know that, we can experience that. And when we know this is happening, learn to pause. Allow time for this emotional excitement and the anxiety to calm down, especially the hormones. Allow time for the hormonal reactions to subside by pausing. Do not react right away. And to help it, learn to relax. And breathing is one of the best ways to help you relax. Take deep breaths, relax the body, and consciously compose the mind to respond to the situation. And then only when your body is adequately relaxed and your mind is adequately calm, that is the time when you can then introspect and think, purposefully focus on wholesome and beneficial response to the problem. So the important tip here is, when you realize your body is changing, tensions in the body, when you realize emotions are being aroused, pause. Don't react. Allow time for this emotional excitement to calm down. And importantly, these hormones to subside. So this pause, relax is very important. Today, we're going to take a look at the relaxed part, how the breathing can help us. So let's listen to this Herbert Benson. Dr. Herbert Benson was one of the first people who researched on meditation. I will show you a short clip this time. Next week, I will show you the longer version. He talked about this relaxation response. He had been researching the effects of meditation. He did this research 40 over years ago. So let's just hear what he has to say about this relaxation response.
We are fortunate that we have within us a response opposite to the fight or flight response. That is the relaxation response. And there are scores of techniques.
But in all of them, 2 steps are needed. The first is a repetition, a word, a sound, a movement. The second is freeing your mind of thought by concentrating on that repetition. And everyone can do it. The relaxation response can be triggered by all kinds of activity, from the repetition of a prayer to the primal beat of dancing. Even the rhythm of exercise can reverse the harmful effects of stress.
So even the exercise itself, doing exercises, can reduce the harmful effects of stress. So the important thing is don't react, pause, and then do something relaxing. And you can also do some exercises if you're feeling all tensed up. Okay. So now let's focus on breathing. I'm going to show you 2 simple techniques today, and I'll explain the rationale behind the importance of mindful breathing. Breathing is really the most critically overlooked relaxation tools. It easily relaxes the body and calms the mind. It increases natural unforced oxygen intake, and oxygen is really food for cells. It stabilizes your heart rate and blood pressure. It regulates your body temperature and blood circulation. It restores and maintains a condition in the body called homeostasis. This is the condition of stability in the body, that the body is not overstressed, the body is not hyperactive, the body is stable. So this is homeostasis. And then it calms the nervous system, indicating an absence of threat. This actually creates what is called the parasympathetic response. What we are experiencing when we get stressed is called the sympathetic response. I'll explain a bit more about these next week when I get into more details about this. This week I'll just quickly run through it. Next week I will go into details of all these actually. And and it helps you to bring your attention and awareness to the present moment. Because as you observe your breathing, you begin to think of your breathing and you are bringing your mind to the present moment. You're not thinking about the past that is disturbing you or a future that is uncertain. Okay? So these are the benefits of mindful breathing. There are many techniques of mindful breathing. Today, I'll just quickly run through 2 very simple ones, which are very helpful. The first one is exercising your diaphragm. Diaphragm workout exercise. Giving your diaphragm a workout, and then with that, you are able to train yourself to practice diaphragmatic breathing. The reason why I show you diaphragm workout exercise is so that you are able to be conscious and aware of how to activate the diaphragm so that you can then use diaphragmatic breathing to help yourself. So deep and full breathing. Now, we're going to use this simple technique, breathing in through the nose. So breathe in with nose. Never breathe in with the mouth. Always breathe in with the nose. And then when you breathe out in this exercise, I'm talking about only for these exercises, you breathe out through your lips, forming an O ring. So to breathe in and breathe out the O ring in your lips. So like that, okay? So we're going to use this technique to do the diaphragm workout exercise. Don't do too hard because if you're new to this, you may feel a little bit dizzy. So when you feel dizzy, just stop and relax. Don't do it. So when you inhale, take a deep just inhale a deep breath through your nose. Don't, when I say long, deep breath, I mean a long breath and deep, not hard. All right, don't exert too much effort on this. Just take in long breath and then hold it for 3 seconds, no more, just 3 seconds, and then you push out through your lips 3 times, 3 times like that. Push out through your lips and push it out, using your diaphragm to force it out. So when you push it out, you can feel your diaphragm activating, forcing it out, and repeat this for 5 times. So let's now do it. I'll do it and you can follow me along. First one, deep breath. So when you blow out, you can feel your diaphragm popping up and down. So this exercise helps you to become aware of your diaphragm. Now, those of you who have not done this before and you're doing this for the first time, if you try to do too hard, you may feel a little bit dizzy, then stop. The important thing is don't do it too hard. You can breathe in, but not hard. And then you blow without being too hard. Right? Push it out 3 times without pushing it too hard, okay? And what it does is it is really very relaxing and awakening. You feel very fresh. It helps to strengthen your immune system because of your long deep breath, right? And it makes you feel more alert and wakeful, and it helps you overall cultivate and improve on the wellness of your body, your health. Right? So the diaphragm is really that muscle separating your lungs from your digestive system, your bowels, right, from your stomach. So between your lungs and your stomach, there is a muscle, right? It's quite a substantial sized muscle, about the size of your palm actually. And it is normally curved, right? So let's take a look at these 3. So if you are breathing with the use of the diaphragm, then you are flattening out your diaphragm. Otherwise, we normally breathe with our chest, okay? And breathing with your chest, you're using your chest muscle. But if you use your diaphragm to breathe, right, your diaphragm will be exercised, right? So when your diaphragm is at rest, it is slightly curled in position number 1. So when you breathe out, you push out, when you breathe in, it flattens the diaphragm, it expands your lungs, and you breathe in. And then when you breathe out, it curls back up, right? If you don't do that, so if this is breathing with diaphragm is between position 1 and 3. If you don't do that, you end up in position number 2, which is lazy breathing, where your diaphragm is hardly being exercised and you're using your chest muscle to expand your lungs. So use your diaphragm instead of your chest muscle. Let's listen to the explanation, the scientist's explanation on how we can use the diaphragm to breathe.
In this diagram, you can see that for the individual on the left, the diaphragm is shaped like a shepherd's crook, and it is nicely rounded. For the individual in the middle, who is characteristic of lazy or shallow breathing, that person has pulled in the mid-torso region, sucked it in, and lifted up the chest and the shoulders. You will notice the diaphragm now has arched up, actually pulled up into that hook. The individual on the right, however, is breathing properly, breathing with support, and you will notice that here the diaphragm is actually pushed down. It is expanded out. Look at the difference in the lung capacity between the individual on the right with supported breathing and the individual in the middle with shallow or lazy breathing.
So we see that to breathe in, we flatten the diaphragm. To breathe out, we curl it back slightly to push it out. Just now, that exercise, what we were doing is we were exercising the diaphragm. So that is helping you to become conscious and aware where the diaphragm is and how you are actually using the diaphragm. So when you push out, remember that pushing out, you're actually using your diaphragm to do that. Now you know where your diaphragm is, you can take control of it, allowing your diaphragm to flatten out, to expand your lungs, to breathe in, and then allow the diaphragm to curl back up slightly to push out the air to compress your lungs. Right? So this is the diaphragmatic breathing. So diaphragmatic breathing, again, breathe in through the nose and breathe out through the lips, but this time do it very gently. Use your diaphragm to draw in the air by flattening out. So in the in-breath, we take 4 or 5 seconds, and in the out-breath, we also do the same, going through the lips 4 or 5 seconds. So breathing in with your nose, and then breathing out with the breathing out through the lips gently. Blow it out like an O-ring, very gently blowing it out. And focusing on your diaphragm. So to flatten your diaphragm to breathe in and allow the diaphragm to curl back up to compress your lungs as you breathe out. So we can do that at your own pace, but I'll just do it. I'll just go through with it now. So let's do it slowly. Breathing in by flattening the diaphragm and breathe in through your nose. Breathe out through your lips gently. Don't do it hard. Then breathe in with your nose. Focus on your diaphragm and do the same. Just keep focusing on your diaphragm. Notice as you can put one hand over your stomach and one hand over your chest. If you are doing it correctly, your chest will not be moving very much. It is your stomach that's going to be moving a bit. As you breathe in, your diaphragm flattens out. It actually expands the lungs and pushes out the stomach a little bit. So you can feel the stomach coming out when you breathe in. When you breathe out through your lips, your diaphragm curls back up. Your lungs compress a little, and you can feel your stomach retracting a little bit. So when you can feel your stomach moving, then you're doing it the right way. So keep doing it, breathing in with your nose gently. Exhale with your lips gently. Exhale fully, so allow it to exhale more and breathe in gently. So put one hand over your stomach and one hand over your chest. You can practice this at home after this session. So this is a very helpful technique. All the time while you're doing this, consciously be aware of the activity of the diaphragm and the fact that you are breathing. This is very relaxing, very calming, and helps you cultivate your attention and improves your wellness. It actually help to strengthen your immune system, because when you're breathing in deep with your diaphragm, you're actually helping more oxygen into your bloodstream, and that can help to strengthen your immune system. Right? So all these are helpful exercises. I hope has been helpful to you. Right? So in summary, now you can practice all this at home. In summary, we talked about the general adaptation syndrome, which is stress, the fight or flight reaction. And we talked about amygdala hijack, extreme distress, amygdala hijack. And we talked a little bit about distress. And we did all these mindful breathing exercises. And the good news is next week, I'm going to introduce you to a very powerful topic that I developed over the years. I have been doing this for many years. I call this mindfulness-based emotional composure. Of course, the acronym is MBEC, MBEC. Mindfulness-based emotional composure. I have taught this all over the world. I have taught this even to a lot of students in the Philippines. I think one of them is watching. I hope Fatima is still there. And I have taught this in the prisons in Philippines, the women's prison, to many sessions. So next week I will talk about this, okay? So the mindfulness-based emotional composure. It is a wellness program that I developed for the body, the mind, and the spirit. This program, actually, the full program, made of 4 half-day sessions. I usually conduct it over 4 weekends, half a day, and I've done that several times also in Malaysia a few years ago. Hopefully when the lockdown or the travel restrictions and meeting restrictions are lifted, and we can conduct sessions in person, I may want to do this again. Mindfulness-based emotional composure. I have conducted this several times at the Buddhist Mahavihara, at Buddhist Gem, BGF, Buddhist Gem Fellowship, BGF, also several places in Klang, Mudita, and Klang and Coast. So many places I've conducted these in the past. Hopefully, when restrictions are lifted, I will be able to do this again, okay? So I think with that, I hope you look forward to this. I'm also looking forward to sharing all this with you next week. A lot of these lessons in mindfulness-based emotional composure, a lot of them are also with the help of lessons from Bhante Punnaji. I have updated this program with the Buddha Dharma. I developed this actually long ago before I was so serious into the Buddha Dharma. And as I studied the Dharma further, and with the help of Bhante Punnaji, I actually improved on this program with the help of Buddha Dharma. So we're going to take a look at that in the next few weeks on this mindfulness-based emotional composure. I may not be able to run the full program because the full program is about 20 hours, right? At least 15 to 20 hours. So, and I won't be able to run so many sessions. So I will probably cut it into half. So I hope all of you will join me. And with that, I end my presentation. So I hope you will download this tiny.cc Awakening 14. This is all the presentation slides I have used today. And so far, we have this question, which I hope I have already answered. All right, Sister Evelyn. So if I have answered this question, I hope this has clarified. Any questions? Now, some of these answers are even more extensively explained in my previous sharing, Awakening 13. So if you really want to go into that further, I have a very thorough explanation in the last sharing, Awakening 13. You can message me and I will send you the links to all those past sharing. Right? So please send me a message and I will send the links to all these past sharing. So I hope this question has been answered. Meanwhile, I don't see any other questions. So let's now share our merits. So if you have any more questions, please feel free to drop me an email, and you can also message me through my Facebook. So let's share the merits. We have spent the last 1.5 hours sharing the Buddha Dharma, and from there we have accumulated a lot of good merits. We also realize a lot of people in Malaysia, in our neighborhood, and around the world, they are all suffering from the coronavirus pandemic. So our heart goes out to them. So let's now share our merits with all the people who are suffering from the coronavirus pandemic. Put our palms together and recite together. We dedicate the merits we have acquired from sharing the Buddha Dharma to all beings affected by the coronavirus pandemic around the world. May suffering beings be suffering free. May the fear-struck fearless be. May grieving beings shed all grief. May all beings find peace and relief. By the grace of the merits we have acquired, may we never follow the foolish. May we follow only the wise until we attain the highest and most supreme bliss of Nibbana. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope it has been beneficial to you. Please come back next week, and I will start the program on mindfulness-based emotional composure. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you once again, and have a good evening. May you and your family be safe, well, comfortable, peaceful, and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.